Hello and welcome to the next episode of the University of Liverpool Academy's Developing Practice podcast. In this episode, myself, Matthew Davis, an organisational developer, and Alex Owen, an academic developer, sat down with three colleagues from the Wellcome Trust. They were Dr Beth Thompson, the head of UK and EU policy, Dr Bleasdale, a senior policy and advocacy advisor, and Dr Diego Baptista, who works between policy and advocacy team and in the diversity and inclusion team. In this Making an Impact special, we discuss the findings of Wellcome's survey of what researchers think about the culture they work in and how we can learn from each other's good practice to improve research culture. We hope you enjoy.
We're really pleased to be speaking to you all today as one of our Making an Impact specials. The Making an Impact Development Series is an annual programme of events which aims to provide rich, varied and high-quality development opportunities for our researchers, academics and research-related professional services staff at all stages of their career across all faculties. And we know that the Wellcome Trust are contributing more widely to the Making an Impact event here at the University of Liverpool. We're really looking forward to hearing about that. But before we get started, we'd love to hear a little bit about your professional backgrounds and how you've arrived at the positions you're in today. So Beth, if we start with you.
Thanks, Alex. So by training, I'm a biochemist. I did my undergrad degree and then I did a PhD in biochemistry and genetics. And while I loved my research career in lots of ways, I also saw major challenges to continuing with that in the long run and being successful in that. So I hopped over into working in science policy, and I've been at Wellcome now for nearly 11 years. And there I was, I've been really pleased to be able to work on things that related closely to the science that I loved and that I could relate to and that I cared about, and also, would also make research better for those who were still there.
Brilliant, thank you for that. Ben, what about yourself?
Similarly, came from a biomedical background, and for me, I think there was a realization towards the end of the PhD that although I was really enjoying the process of science, that a lot of the skills I got the most out of were actually probably better used elsewhere. And as someone who spent a lot of time in a dark room with an electron microscope, I was quite keen to go and talk to people. So I think that was the big moment of transition for me to move into policy, and went through an internship route that was available through my funder. And then I've moved around lots of different organisations, some in the civil service, one of the national academies, and then finally settled at Wellcome for the past 3 years. So yeah, it's been still early stages of the career, I guess, but yeah, really enjoying that transition from the kind of science to the policy side.
Great. And then finally, Diego.
So I too come from a biochemistry background. I worked as a biochemist and biophysicist for a long time, and both like Beth and Ben realized that there were certain skills that I thought that I developed in the research environment that were better used outside of research. Two of the things that I really focused on sort of outside of research in my academic career were open research and increasing diversity of people that were represented in the sciences. And I'm really lucky that I get to work at Wellcome now and work on some of these issues in a role that's adjacent to research, but not necessarily doing research.
Brilliant. So you're all kind of hinting at it, but what was it specifically about the Wellcome Trust that really attracted you to kind of make that jump over?
If I kick off, I had worked briefly at the Royal Society of Chemistry, and actually there, although I was a biochemist, I always felt a little bit of a fraud, and I was really pleased to come kind of, I guess, go back to my roots, as it felt, at Wellcome, which was obviously much closer to where I'd come from. But I mean, I also loved the fact, and I didn't see it entirely until I was in Wellcome, but the breadth of Wellcome's activities and the kind of range of exciting things it does.
So yeah, very much likewise like Beth. I think for me the real excitement is Wellcome as a funder is able to live as we preach, I guess. And having worked in lots of different policy roles, it's really nice to be able to be in an organisation where if we really believe in something, we can take the time to try something new, if we think that's the right decision. And yeah, I find that a really rewarding way of doing the work.
And Diego, is there anything that you miss about being a lab-based scientist?
Oh, I mean, on a very silly level, I miss the precision of physical activities, essentially moving around like liquids in a really precise manner. But I've taken up baking, so I'm able to like live out my lab dreams in my kitchen.
I like that. Precise baking, I don't do that.
Yeah.
I've still got a P1000 at home, actually, Diego, an old defunct one that I use now. So if you want to get your cooking down to the fine art, I can lend you that. No tips, though. You'll have to...
Brilliant. So Ben, is there anything that you've brought from your experience as being a lab-based scientist into the work that you do at Wellcome?
I think for me, I often get asked the question about kind of what does that transition feel like? And I usually say to people that it is more familiar than you'd expect. And that sort of really methodical, evidence-based approach is exactly how policy should work. And I'm not saying it always does everywhere, but certainly at Wellcome, we really pride ourselves on that idea about going back to the evidence, keeping an open mind, and then working from there. And so I think that rigor, that ability to really critically analyze something and scrutinize it in a meaningful way, get deep into the stats. Maybe that's just me. I really like that stuff. But I think, that kind of, it sounds a bit generic, but that scientific approach to making a decision, I think, is incredibly useful still.
I have to echo that, Ben. Sorry. One of the things that I was actually quite scared of leaving the research environment was not getting into a really niche subject. So, right, I was an MR spectroscopist and I felt very comfortable with it. But now coming at a place like Wellcome, you can actually be incredibly well-read and niche in the subject that you're working on, something like research culture. And there's other people around who are also really excited to be nerdy about particular aspects of higher education, for example.
Fantastic.
For me, I agree with Ben and Diego. The thing that I miss from the lab is that the thrill of new data. So when you pick up your blot or whatever it is, and you kind of have that moment of interpreting. But actually, I found replacements for that within our work. So when you're working on a piece of legislation and you get a new set of amendments to it, or a kind of leaked version of a policy document, and then applying those analytical skills, as Ben said, but also the working with really smart, engaged people, which I did in the lab, and I loved, and was one of the things that I would really worry about when I missed, that I'd miss when I left. That I've not missed at all, because now I work somewhere that I'm still surrounded by really interesting people, and actually with more diverse perspectives and backgrounds, and I find that really valuable.
Well, that's great to hear some of your backgrounds about and some of the reasons about why working at Wellcome, was appealing to you. Just to add in there, I'm also baking. Nobody beats my shortbread at the moment. I can absolutely guarantee you. Having made just 2 batches now, I am already shortbread king in my house.
I'm sorry we're not in person, because we could be enjoying some of your shortbread as we do that.
Yeah, we could.
I mean, I need samples, so.
Evidence-based decisions, you see.
That's fine. I'm happy to provide samples. It's probably it might kill you. It's the most buttery shortbread you've ever tasted in your life. But anyway, moving on ever so slightly, we're obviously going to be talking about research culture, and specifically, Wellcome's campaign to build a better research culture, which I've heard an awful lot about, not only through my colleagues in terms of the supporting research aspects, but also through the technicians' commitment, of which I'm one of the leads for in the University of Liverpool. So these things do cross over, and it's really interesting to build on those conversations that we already have. So a quick question, I'll just throw it out to you to start with, Beth. What does a good and positive research culture mean specifically for you?
When I left research, one of the things that really worried me about it was that the hyper competition that exists was damaging the way that research was done, both in terms of the quality and the rigor of the research itself. And I heard at times sort of people talking about, everyone was trying to get their research out fastest rather than having done it well. And I was worried about that and the impact it had on science, but I was also worried about the impact it had on who was ending up in research careers and the kind of personality type that selects for. And so for me, a more positive research culture is one where we're getting that great high quality research that's really exciting and based on diverse ideas and diverse people.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. And through the survey and the community engagement we've done over the last few months, we've really heard a lot about poor examples of research culture. And through some of the events that we've been holding, these town halls across the UK, we've actually been going out of our way to stop people and say, describe a great environment you've worked in. You know, everyone has one place at least where they say, I really thrived there. I really got a lot out of it. And so we've tried to get people to stop for a minute and say, what was it about that place that was so special? What quality did it have? And we were able to then start to piece that together into almost a kind of a description, a vision of what a positive culture would look like based on what people were telling us. And our hope is to be able to build that over the next few months and publish it out there so that Wellcome can hold itself to account against that as a vision. So, I mean, most of the things in there are very familiar to people, and everything, you know, that Beth has said is already in there. But I think we've yet to see that put down in one place. And it seems like a really obvious thing to do, but drawing that all together as a description overall of what a great culture looks like, I think is going to be really important to getting change to stick.
So in my interview for this current role, I mentioned kind of in a joking manner that success for positively impacting research culture might result in less and less people who leave academia to describe themselves as recovering academics. And like with a bit more thought, actually, I think this brings up an interesting aspect of the culture itself. So when people leave research, a large proportion, maybe larger than you'd expect, might feel shame or resent for their experience. And I really think it shouldn't be like this. So people should look back and be proud that they participated in the endeavor, and certainly shouldn't leave because of, you know, maybe inappropriate experiences that they had. And so like a positive research culture for me looks like one that actually puts more value on the people that do research and all of the people that participate in the research endeavor. I mean, this takes a lot of work because people have many different experiences, perspectives, backgrounds, but we can all agree that this will be game-changing for research.
I love anything that's game-changing.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, as I mentioned before, I've heard about Reimagine Research and the campaign, but there'll be plenty of people out there who are listening who probably haven't heard of it. So just give a bit of a brief synopsis of that and explain what your involvement in it is. Diego, can I stick with you?
Sure. So I work as the diversity and inclusion advisor on the program. So lending a certain perspective to all of the programs that and initiatives that we developed, and also making sure the right people are connected when we're developing some of those programs. I also am figuring out how Wellcome as a funder can turn the momentum that you might have heard about into action. And so we're brewing up some exciting plans for the culture program that align really nicely with a strategy refresh that Wellcome's working on. And hopefully we'll be able to discuss some of those things in the future. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, great. Beth, what's your involvement in it?
So I've been really privileged actually to be involved in this from the outset. It's an issue that I've been concerned about for a long time. But across Wellcome as a whole, we got increasingly concerned that a bunch of symptoms or kind of negative attributes to the research environment were interlinked and needed a kind of holistic approach to work out how we were going to tackle them. So things like lack of reproducibility, lack of diversity and inclusion, problems with bullying and harassment, they're all challenges that we're seeing across the sector that Wellcome had been dealing with on a kind of case-by-case basis or issue by issue, but we hadn't really spent time thinking about what was underpinning them. So I was part of an initial group that looked at what Wellcome might be able to do to address those. And that was really the kind of embryonic form of Reimagine Research. So I've been leading the team of people across Wellcome who've developed and delivered the campaign. I mean, really our goal is to explore how we as Wellcome can make research culture better and how we can build on the momentum that's already there in the community and deliver the relationships that we really need to make that change happen. And we're very conscious within Wellcome that Wellcome has helped to create that focus on excellence, this kind of narrow, single-minded sense of what great research is that has driven some of these challenges in the culture. And we think that we have a responsibility to fix that. But we also know that many other people have identified the challenges first, and lots of other people have been trying to solve it. And we can only do that if we all work together in partnership. So lots of our work is about how we work with others and what we can do as a community. And that's where a lot of Ben's role comes in.
So I get to be very much Diego's counterpoint, and as he's focused very much internally on what Wellcome needs to do to live up to the promises, I've been looking outside of the organisation. And while it's critical that Wellcome lives as we preach, what we know is that some of these cultural issues are systemic, they're huge, and Wellcome on its own will never be able to fix some of them. And so what we've been doing is working really closely with other big organizations across the sector, whether that's funders or universities and all the individuals as well, and trying to make this a community effort so that it feels like change is possible. So, through all of that, we've been sharing all of the data we've collected. We've been going out, communicating it, hosting events, making sure that people have a real chance to share their thoughts, share their experiences, and also share their ideas for doing things differently. I think really trying to build that sense of momentum that this is something that the sector needs to do, and it needs to do it now, and we'll be part of that, but Wellcome will be one among many.
Thanks, Ben. Beth, you just picked out some of the things there that Wellcome feel that some of the things that you were driving, you're sort of looking to undo. Is that fair to say?
It is. I think we see things happening in the research environment that are things that we don't want to see. And there's lots of brilliant things about the way research works. There's passionate people who are doing brilliant research. There's also really good mentors and leaders, and there's people doing really robust, rigorous science. But our view of it is that we don't have the system itself doesn't provide the incentives to make sure that everyone's doing those things all the time. And in fact, lots of the way the incentives work means that it's hard to be kind. It's hard to do that really great, robust, rigorous science all the time, because everything is about what you publish, and we're measuring people on such a small number of things, with that focus on outputs and excellence very narrowly defined. So it is fair to say that we think that's driving problems that we're seeing across research that really shouldn't be there, and that will make research much better in itself if we can find ways to stop those.
Yeah.
But that is a systems problem. It's not a kind of issue by issue problem, and that's partly why we commissioned the research that was published earlier this year to show kind of where we think the biggest hotspots or challenges are and what we might be able to do about them.
Okay, so I take it these challenges and hotspots, these are things that came out of the survey originally then, yeah?
Yes, I mean, the survey wasn't the first research or the first evidence to show that there were challenges. So before we undertook that research, we were aware of some of these things, and indeed Wellcome was already working on them. But I think the survey is the biggest survey of its type, and also kind of the most holistic view we have across the whole research community.
Thanks, Beth. Okay, so I'm just going to dive a little bit deeper, or ask you to dive a little bit deeper into the findings from the survey and the research that you've done. So can I just ask each of you for sort of one specific that came out of that research? Beth, can I start with you?
Of course. I think one of the findings that I found most striking was about management and leadership. And I guess partly because it resonated with me personally in my experience, but also because some of the numbers in there are really fascinating. So we heard from 80% of people who are managing others say that they've got the knowledge and the skills they need to manage a diverse team. So we've got kind of 80% of people saying they're pretty ace managers, but then less than half of them, around half, had actually received training on how to manage. But even more interestingly, those people who were being managed, when you ask them about what their experience of being managed is, the kind of things that they were picking out in terms of what they were seeing from their manager day to day just don't tally with 80% of people being great managers. So, for example, only about half had any feedback on their performance or had an appraisal in that year. And I think that the kind of disconnect between managers thinking they're pretty good at it and people who are being managed kind of reporting that they're not experiencing great management is actually really important. And there's something about I guess the way that we perceive management and leadership in in research that I think needs a lot of work. I would really hope that we can take those findings and work out what good leadership looks like in research, both on the academic side and also in professional services, and make sure that we're delivering that routinely for people and that it becomes part of people's jobs. So people talk about it in the interviews that we did as a kind of afterthought, that it's something that they have to do, but it's kind of not high on anyone's priority list. And I think in working now in another profession, I really see the value of good leadership, and I'd love research to benefit from that too.
I think that's really interesting. One of the other podcasts that we've got as part of this series is with someone called Nadia Solomon, and she's at Imperial as a postdoc, but I'm getting some thumbs up from Diego as well. So you've obviously met Nadia, but she's a really interesting colleague. So she worked as in the army, and now she's moved across into research, but a lot of her work is around exactly what you're saying, Beth, in terms of leadership and management and how we can work with the sector to really develop that level of support. So that's a nice link there with one of our other podcasts.
Ben, can I come to you next?
Of course, yeah. I think the finding that really caught my attention was how widespread the sense of isolation is within research, and particularly in a career that I consider to be very much a team sport. We saw huge levels of people feeling very isolated from their colleagues, and that they were really fighting a fight on their own. And the stats covered people at all levels, but 70% of those in junior roles told us that research was an isolating and lonely career. And I think that was really distressing actually to read. And the same with people in senior roles, 64% of them. So this is something that people are feeling throughout their careers. And when we dug into that and people's motivations behind saying that, we heard about this sense that the competition, the pressure was really whittling away at the sense of collegiality within the workplace, that it was really beginning to bear down on all the things that people took a lot of solace from, and a lot of support from others around them. And I think, going back to the point that Beth made before, this idea that it's taken some of the kindness out of the workplace. And I think that was quite a difficult thing to read, actually, and something that on the outside looks very team-based, but actually people are really struggling on their own.
So following up on this, the pressure that people are put under and how that might take the kindness out of the system, I think the statistic or theme that came out of the report that shocked me the most was the number of people that reported having experienced bullying and harassment. So we saw about 43% of people say they've experienced it themselves, and then 61% of people said they've witnessed bullying and harassment in their research environments. And the numbers were actually much higher if you identified as a disabled researcher or a female researcher, and then if you identified as a BAME colleague, racial harassment was much higher for you. And sort of having an experience in academia that you might have seen some of those things was, that clearly is the case, but seeing quantitative numbers put on it, I think was quite alarming and rings a lot of bells that say, actually, these are things, this is definitely an area that we need to put quite a bit of effort into.
Yeah, thanks, Diego. I mean, those figures are alarming. I mean, even if just on those figures on bullying alone, you'd think something really drastically needs to be done. So you couple that up with leaders saying they didn't have the development and the other aspects there. You can really see why this campaign, as it is gaining a lot of traction, because it's obviously singing to a lot of people.
So Ben, it's my understanding that you've held some town hall events that have been organised to kind of unpack some of the survey's findings and helping the kind of research community to digest some of what you found through the survey. Can you tell us a little bit about what you found from some of those events?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the town hall events were a really great chance to hear from people directly, and I think the survey was critical, and having that mass of data has really helped us understand where some of the problems are. But actually, these are very personal issues, they're very emotive issues, and being able to have those conversations in person has been enormously helpful. Many participants told us how great they felt that it was that they were in a room and discussing these issues as equals alongside their colleagues from all different disciplines, from different roles and different career stages. And we had a few comments on the day that people felt they were being part of a conversation that normally they wouldn't be privy to. And I think that was quite a powerful thought in people's minds. I think it really lodged something in people's minds that actually this is something we all have a relationship to, whether you're a kind of researcher in the lab, whether you're working in a professional services role. All of those things are contributing towards the research endeavour as a whole. So it was really nice to hear a lot of perspectives. I'd say the overriding thing that came out was the very personal toll that the current culture is taking on individuals. And it was quite difficult to hear, I would say, at a lot of points. We had someone stand up and tell us that having mental health issues seemed to be the norm in this job. And I think hearing really stark comments like that was a helpful energizer for people in the room to actually really take stock of that this isn't something that's out there that's separate from people. This isn't just a set of numbers and statistics. This is people's very real everyday experience of going to work. And so I think we really tried to take stock of that and make sure that those sessions were not just about understanding the really difficult numbers that came out of the survey, but then also talking about the ideas for doing something differently. And we had a huge range of ideas flowing out of each of those events, from the very small to huge ones about, how do you transform peer review, all the way down to how do you change a grant deadline to make it much easier for people with families or commitments to work around. And we'll be collating all of those together, both the kind of discussion of the challenges and the ideas for change, and publishing it in an anonymised report once the town hall series is over. So we're really looking forward to getting that information out there so that others can work on it as well as ourselves.
I think that's really lovely. Matt and I have recorded quite a few of these podcasts now with a whole range of different people, postdocs, someone from Vitae. And what you're saying there is exactly what's come out of a lot of those conversations, that, we'll always have the pressure to, get published in academic journals, all of those kind of things. But actually, it's that what you were talking about, Beth, in terms of kindness and actually supporting each other and communicating and, bringing the whole spectrum of people into the discussions. That's really, really important. And I think for us, through these podcasts, that concept of mental health and the impact on mental health has come through very, very strongly. So it's lovely to hear that, people are starting to wake up to this and start to address it.
I'd say there's an enormous amount still to do, and we've kind of only really just opened the box. But I think giving people a dedicated space to think about this and take stock, alone put it on people's radar is important. It showed people at every level of the kind of career hierarchy that this is something that deserves attention and needs to be fixed. So my hope is that it sets things off in motion that Wellcome doesn't even have an involvement or know about, but that there's that sense of ownership in the community.
Yeah, there's something there about what Ben mentioned of putting the issue on the radar that I think is really, really important. So understanding that it's not only yourself and your cohort of PhD students or postdocs that are having these issues, but at least one person in every echelon of academia that is saying, oh gosh, I'm feeling really bad because my grant got rejected and I don't know who to talk to. And so making that conversation happen a bit, we're obviously trying to facilitate.
I think there's two really important aspects in what Diego and Ben have said that have come across so strongly. And first, that the survey results themselves are really striking, and there's some really difficult findings in there. But the sense that they have kind of empowered people to share their experiences, and that they feel less alone is really critical. And for me, that was I hadn't anticipated how strong that effect would be, but has been really important. And then the second thing, I think, is the sense of people's determination and willingness to do something about it. And the town halls have been remarkably kind of optimistic and positive experiences in terms of that desire for change and the fact we can find solutions, which when you're talking about such difficult and personal issues, I think means that we've got a really good chance as a sector of coming together to actually tackle these problems.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's so true. So Beth, what do you think the lasting effect of COVID-19 will be on the research culture specifically?
It's a great question about what the lasting effect of the pandemic will be on research culture. And I think so far we've seen it bring out some really good characteristics of the research community. And we've also seen some of the challenges in research culture playing out too. So I think there's a long way to go in terms of seeing what the lasting impact is, but I hope there will really be some positives from it. I think we've seen more collaboration and less competition, and that sense that although there is a real rush and a sense of urgency, it's not to beat people, it's so that we get the data out there so that others can learn from it. And that, to me, is what research should all be about, and is great to see that coming to the fore. And the data sharing and the open access and the use of preprints, which are all things that we at Wellcome think are really important and should become part of business as usual for research. A really interesting aspect of it that I've seen people talking about on social media is how we recognise the interruption to people's research careers. So I think it's widely accepted that people's productivity in terms of their normal research is going to be interrupted. How are we going to recognise that? And we know that the sector as a whole is going to have to find ways to say, well, we accept you couldn't do as much this year, but what could we learn from that different model of reward and recognition for people who take time out to, say, look after their kids or for other caring responsibilities? And I think there's a really interesting challenge for us there as a community to say, well, we can do this for everyone now, but how can we take bits like adjusting our recognition to improve the kind of inclusivity of the environment in the future?
Yeah, I think, as Beth says, for me, the revelation that's come from COVID is the stark reminder it's given us all that research is done by people, and sometimes we lose sight of that and just see a system, or we see the outputs and we see the papers. And I think this whole situation has helped remind us that it's individual people with individual situations and contexts and things to look after at home. And I think it's been a really, in some ways, a helpful reminder of the fact that we need to look after each other. We need to act as a community against this outside goal, that it's about trying to achieve something as a group and as a, that sense of collegiality, really, which I think, unfortunately, the current system has really whittled away to its bare bones. So my hope is that when the current really difficult times begin to ease, that we will see people carry that reminder forward with them, that actually, when you look at ref scores and when you look at H indexes, that you're looking at a person and their career and how they get through the day. And I really hope that we'll all carry that picture, forward with us.
Yeah, well said, Ben. I fully agree with that. I can't imagine anybody wouldn't. Diego, just coming to you. Beth said earlier that it's about a partnership between Wellcome and universities, the higher education sector. So what do you think specifically that universities can do to improve research culture, coming at that from an inclusion sort of point of view?
Well, the first thing I think is partnering with the town halls and participating in the sort of events that we're promoting right now. So Ben has worked really hard on an event called Cafe Culture, or a sort of little board game called Cafe Culture, where you can download a pack or order a pack. It'll be put online in June, right. And you can have discussions about the research culture in your environment that you work in. So we're asking that peer groups come together. So groups of PhD students or postdocs or vice provosts would be an amazing cafe culture to sit on the wall for. And then sort of digest some of the issues that might have come up in the report, and also go through and talk about solutions to how you might, benefit or influence your research culture in a positive way. Additionally, we've set up an online platform. So if you go to the website, you can find, it's called our Ideas Platform, and it's quite a nice space that's gotten a bit more use than I expected. The idea is that you, as a researcher or someone who is running a cafe culture, can go online and post the outputs from your cafe culture or your ideas to solve a particular problem in research culture. It's fully transparent. You can like other people's ideas. You can comment on other people's ideas. And it brings up a few of the things that we've mentioned, like seeing other people might have the same issue and then a similar idea to solve a problem, I think might be really comforting. Additionally, you can see quite a wide variety of ideas that are coming out of some of the discussions people are having.
Thanks, Diego. Ben, have you got anything to build on that, considering that I think Diego just mentioned that we can blame you for cafe culture.
Yes, my grand schemes. Yeah, we've been really excited actually about having multiple ways to engage with this process, and we're very aware that the survey, we had a fantastic response, over 4,000 people. The town halls were going out across the whole of the UK and bringing people together, but even then we just can't reach enough people, and we're very aware of that. And
yeah.
For us, the cafe culture kits were a way of democratizing the process and saying Wellcome isn't going to fix this on our own because we don't know what to do. What we need is people's ideas, of people's real experiences, and that everybody's opinion counts, and it's very helpful. So those kits are designed to help people have those conversations. They're quite difficult, and we know that, but we think that getting together in a group of peers, originally people were doing them with a physical box around a coffee table, but now we're transitioning to this kind of Zoom or Teams capable setup so that people can keep doing it remotely if needed. But we're really encouraging people to get involved and to tell us what you think. Diego mentioned the online site that we have. That is being used. We are sharing that with other partners. It's a great resource that's building up. So yeah, that would be my kind of spur for those who've not yet had the delights of a cafe culture. Is please do get involved. Whatever career stage you're at, whatever you work on and however you do it, please share what you think with us.
One of the great things about cafe culture is it's getting people to think about what different parts of the system can do to make things better. And that was really deliberate on our part, because I think it's so important that we don't kind of shove the blame on, say, publishers or funders or the research institutions and expect one part of the system to be able to fix it on its own. But that said, every part of the sector does need to do its bit to make things better and to make changes. And universities are clearly a really important part of that. So we know many universities are already taking a lot of action to make changes and implementing and delivering initiatives like Athena Swan and some of the other equality charters. And that's really important that work continues. There's also great work going on in universities, for example, to recognise the work of technicians. So there's lots of things already happening. And it's really important that those things carry on. But we'd also like to see a kind of more coherent sense of what it is that's happening and what needs to change. And that's one of the things that we'll be thinking about over the coming months and in fact years, because this is a generational shift that we're talking about. But I think ultimately universities are often the employer, and therefore they have a big responsibility to think through in terms of what they're asking in terms of promotion and progression criteria, and the support that they provide for their staff.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, being the employer, there's plenty that university can do, and I suppose what you're mentioning there is partly around our own internal policies and making sure that they're up to scratch to make sure that the research culture is a just and fair one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's something really important about embedding what's needed to create a good research culture through policies and through the way things are done, and it being role modelled by leadership and becoming part of everyday practice. And I think that's going to be a challenge for all of us, because changing culture isn't easy. But starting with some of the easy things like making sure policies are right in the first place is a really good place to start. But then we have to make sure that we're living those things as well.
Brilliant. It's been really interesting to hear about the work that the Wellcome Trust and you as colleagues working for the Wellcome Trust are doing around research culture and the conversations that are starting to take place. It'd be great to hear about what's next on your agenda, potentially personally and also for your work in terms of the Trust. Beth, I know that you're involved in making an impact. Is that correct?
I am. I was coming up to give a lecture in June, which we'll now do remotely, and I'm really looking forward to that. I'm going to talk a bit about my career in policy, and talk about research culture and what I think a great research environment looks like, but then also take a look at the big picture of in terms of what the government are doing in terms of supporting the research community across the UK. We heard from the last Science Minister that there would be a research people strategy. So if we get any more updates on that, I'll be talking about that too, but I'll at least share my thoughts on what I think the UK needs to do to be a great place to be employed as a researcher.
Brilliant. And what else is on your agenda?
So we've been through a really interesting time at Wellcome, adjusting our work to this new normal. But actually, lots of things for us are carrying on as normal. So I'll leave Ben and Diego to talk about what's happening in the culture program in particular. But we're continuing to keep a really close eye on what happens with Brexit, or the UK-EU future relationship, as we're now meant to call it, because those negotiations at the moment are carrying on, and that's a big part of the team's work. And we're also doing a couple of other really interesting projects on things like research investment that Ben's very involved in. So there's lots of work going on, but this research culture piece is one of the top priorities for us at the moment, because it's so important that it happens.
As Beth says, we're working very hard to reschedule our plan for the year ahead, and we're very keen that we did investigate some options about whether there were things we could shift to online, but we do think that some of these conversations, given how difficult they are, do need to be in person and within a group, and that there is a lot of value in that. So we've really tried to think about how we'll be able to reschedule some of these town halls and continue that series, and then build towards our big summit. And this is an event that we're going to be hosting here in London, hopefully towards the end of the year, once the town halls are complete. And for us, that's really the transition from gathering lots of evidence, lots of ideas, and a better understanding of culture, and beginning to transform that into a set of actions. And we want that summit to be a moment where we can say to the sector, we've listened, this is what we've heard, we've collated it all together, this is what we're going to do next. And it will be the start, and it will be a long process of getting that done, but we really think there needs to be a clear moment where we stop and say, okay, we've got enough to start. Even though we won't be able to fix it perfectly, we need to begin. So that's the big summit for us. And I think in the meantime, we're really working on cafe cultures and all those different ways that we can keep people engaged, as well as trying to take stock of all the wonderful evidence we've collected so far. So yeah, it's going to be a busy time on the culture side. And as Beth says, the other half of my job, which is kind of pushing government to invest in public money in science, is also quite busy at the moment. There's some things going on aware. So that's keeping me busy. Yeah, plenty to do.
And as I mentioned earlier, I get to sort of work on Wellcome internally to figure out how we can take this momentum and turn them into action. So if anything, this gives us a bit more time to be a bit more thoughtful about some of the things we might do. And especially because there's been so many people who have worked on aspects of research culture within Wellcome for a long time. And now we kind of have a mandate to do it in a coordinated way, which I think is a really wonderful thing. Additionally, Wellcome is completely redoing its strategy for how we're going to fund research, and that's a perfect opportunity to input incentives that would make people be kind all the time, right? Or positively benefit their research culture. So that's certainly going to keep me busy until the summit, and I have to say I'm a bit happy to have some more time.
Yeah, I think lots of people have been reflecting on that, haven't they? That being forced to work in a different way at the moment is giving people time to take a step back and to really reflect on why we do what we do, and actually then build on that for the future. So it sounds like, well, there's never a good time for a pandemic, is there? But actually, it sounds like if this is a time for you to be able to actually reflect on what you've been doing, so that you can hit the ground running once things change again.
We'd like to finish each podcast with 3 or 4 take-home tips that the listeners could reflect on in terms of their own personal practice. So I think if you could each give us one thought, hint, or tip to reflect on in relation to your work, what would they be? And we'll go in the same order again. If you can start with Beth.
Thanks. For me, it's not to let uncertainty stop you doing really important things. And think by nature, I kind of like to think things through. I'm not much of a risk taker. But 2 of the things that I'm most pleased that I've done, so my career change, moving from academia into policy, and kicking off Wellcome's work on research culture, were kind of full of uncertainty for me. I really didn't know how either would go. And for big decisions that we're making, our information is so rarely perfect that sometimes I think you do just have to take the plunge and take that risk, but maybe have a contingency plan just in case.
My tip, I think, would be to urge people to work together. We heard a lot about that sense of isolation within research, and yet all of the data we collected shows that actually many people share the similar experience of the current culture. I was really taken back by a conversation we had around one of the tables at one of the town hall events we hosted. And after going through some of the findings of the survey, someone turned to the group and said, "I thought it was just me." That's really stuck with me, actually. And we've heard that multiple times of people saying they hadn't realized how widespread some of these things were, that other people had had similar experiences. And, up to that point, they just thought that it was them and they should just put their head down and carry on. So I would really urge people to say, finding allies, whether that's at an individual level or an organizational level. It's been fantastic through all of this initiative of finding how much support there is out there. We've had such an overwhelmingly positive response from the whole community. And that support has brought to life all of the problems and the challenges and the ideas that we're seeing. So, yeah, that would be my urge to people, would be to say, work together. You might be surprised by how many people are out there who have had a very similar experience to you.
Sort of somewhat related to that point, I would say my tip would be, don't be afraid to ask questions and seek more information about potentially uncomfortable subjects. So even if you're afraid to, even if you're worried about showing you're a bit less knowledgeable about something than you might think you should be, I think there's something within academia and research where showing that bit of vulnerability isn't encouraged. And I think that type of behavior is great to show, one, genuine interest in something that you're not knowledgeable about, and then two, exhibiting that you yourself might not know everything, and that's okay. I think we can generally all learn to embrace each other's vulnerabilities, and this might make everybody seem kinder.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. It's been really interesting to talk to the three of you, and I wish you all the success in the coming future as well with everything that you're trying to achieve. All the best to you, and thanks for your time today.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Well, that was a really interesting chat with colleagues from the Wellcome Trust. It's really good to hear about the work that they're involved in, and also some of the changes that they've had to make in response to the COVID situation. One of the things that really stood out to me was, I think it was Ben who was talking about how some of the events that they've run have really revealed the personal toll on some people of working as a researcher. And he mentioned the feedback that they've had isn't just a set of numbers or statistics, but it's actually people's everyday experiences of going to work. And for him, I think that was quite a powerful piece of research that he'd been involved in, and it had quite a powerful impact on some of the changes that they're hoping to make. He was saying that in research, we measure people on their outputs and their excellence, which sometimes drives problems that shouldn't really be there, and that they want to find ways at Wellcome of addressing some of these challenges. Yeah,
I think you're right. Some of the things that he heard during the town hall events, in particular, really did stick with him, didn't they? And he did say it's spurred him on to help make those changes. One of the things that's come out of COVID and the lockdown is something what Beth said, and how there's been a real move amongst the research community to work together in support of each other and to collaborate rather than to compete. And they're hoping that this will become part of business as usual for research. And I think we've seen that in other areas as well, haven't we? I mean, across HE and in local communities as well, there's a real sense of collaboration and camaraderie and community to stick together through this. And I think, if one of the things that comes out of a global pandemic is that we all talk to each other and stick together and root for each other, then at least that's one good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. We have seen that, haven't we? And other people have picked up on that in some of the other podcasts that we've recorded across lockdown, across this difficult time. Well, there's lots in that discussion that I hope you found useful and that you'll go away and reflect on. We've added some further resources to the website, specifically in relation to the conversation that we've had in this podcast. So if you'd like to take your thinking further, you can access those resources at liverpool.ac.uk/the-academy/podcast. And there's a specific reading list linked to this podcast. Also, we love to hear back from you in terms of the conversations that we've had. So please do tweet us about this episode at Live Uni Academy, and you can also contact us directly at eLearnerMatt or at Alexandra_Owen on Twitter.
Yeah, and we're really grateful for those who have taken the time to either rate or review our show in your podcast provider's app. So if you've listened and enjoyed this episode, please rate or even better review the show, as it really does help us get noticed, and therefore more people will find us as a result. And if you do review the show, we will give you a shout out on the show, and hopefully get that conversation going. Also, I know a lot of you have listened and have not yet subscribed, so hit the follow button or the subscribe button to keep up to date with our latest episodes. Bye for now.